And next up, we have Berserker, a LitRPG urban fantasy adventure, Apocosmos, book number 1, written by Dimitrios. They told me how to say that last name, and I already forgot my brain. So I'm not going to. Dimitrios. I have to try. Yes. So I'm sorry, Dimitrios. I know you actually sent in the correct pronunciation, and I forgot to add it to the notes. This is 445 pages, $4.99. It's available on Kindle Unlimited. Here's the author's description. Alex is a game developer, though he'd much rather stream RPG classics or spend time with Louie. That's his adorable corgi. He also hates people, not in a homicidal way, but rather in an extremely antisocial one, unless you hurt Louie. In such an instant, Alex is pulled into the Apocosmos, where our whole world is just a blip in a colorful tapestry of millions of others. A multiverse ruled by a strict system, where Norse, Greek, and Celtic pantheons clash, where dwarves craft, dragons hoard, vampires don't glitter, and a world that is cruel as it is epic. Alex wants none of that, though. He just wants to earn an early retirement somewhere in Spain. There's money to be made in the Apocosmos. Alex will take advantage of the market just like he did in his MMORPG days, in what seems like an error-proof plan. But it's a zero-sum game, and some people would do anything to eliminate competition. Full disclosure, I received advance copy for review. I purchased a copy when it became available. Okay. There's some good parts of the story that I really enjoyed, but there's a lot of other stuff that I had issues with, and that fundamentally made this not work for me. The cover art, the opening prologue in the story don't really necessarily match with what I was expecting. Basically, from the cover, you would basically, I should say, I had an expectation that there was going to be a lot of fighting, that there's a lot of combat. Main character is a berserker. They're not known for their, accounting skills. Rather, their fighting prowess. And from the opening, prologue in this section, where the main character is set up on, was in this King Conan kind of way of being this older, amazing berserker badass in a gladiator ring with other, people around him, oohing and ahhing at his whole list of, accomplishments and saving people. I was expecting, again, more conflict, more fighting, more action, adventure. And that's not what actually happens here. Instead, you get something that's very much urban fantasy with RPG mechanics, or real life RPG system, where the main character, for the most part, is a day trader. He's not crafting himself. He's either outsourcing it, or he has an automated system within this RPG kind of parallel universe, where he is essentially speculative marketing, where he's taking materials, having them made into products, and selling them according to his analysis of the trends on a weekly basis, where it's good to buy low and to sell high, and making a profit. And that is a little outside of his skill set a little bit, as far as it's given to us. But it is an interesting system. I actually really enjoyed the trading system, even though it wasn't something I was expecting, and it was still an enjoyable mechanic. It just didn't really click in with what my expectations are. And I think that part of this trend at working is unreasonable expectations based upon the things that I'm shown or given, or unfulfilled expectations, I should say. And on the story side of things, again, it really is just dual narrative between the future main character and current main character. Future main character is this, again, badass berserker, and he's supposed to be recounting his life, and at the same time in a gladiator ring, except his life in the present, which is an urban fantasy, is very much feels disconnected from future him, which is in a fantasy setting in a gladiator ring, where he's trying to do some uprising at the same time as talking about himself, essentially. From future self him, there's this expectation of conflict or action at some point, and it doesn't really pan out. It's just him talking, or him doing world building, or him doing, explaining things or talking to characters. And it's not till the very, very end of the story where that pays off as far as action goes at all. And so there's this huge swath of the story where it's is the action going to come through now? Nope. And now? Nope. through a series of, prologues or interludes. And it's just really felt disconnected for me, at least story wise, with the main character in the present section, where he starts up with him being a normal person, gone out for a walk with his dog, and him picking a fight with 5 dudes who stepped on his dog's tail, and having almost winning against him, and then some instance, one of them using some magic spell to bring him into this urban fantasy-esque plot device where he's like, oh, now you're part of the secret RPG world, and suddenly they can beat him up for some reason, whereas a normal person they couldn't, which didn't make sense to me on a game mechanic level, but it's a thing. And so he's pushed into this secret world, parallel universe that's layered on top of ours, where people go on quests and have RPG mechanical aspects and stats and abilities and skill trees, whatever the case is. And you would think, oh, he's going to go on quests and adventures and do actiony stuff in line with my expectation from the cover art and the novel prologue. Nope. He day trades. And that's really legitimately probably like 70% of the story, where he's just looking at ways of making money to pay off his medical bills and to pay off his home, with an idea of like an early retirement, and the antagonistic force of this unknown seen other trader who's opposing him. And it's not a badly told story. It's just in direct conflict with what I was expecting, which is what it is. And the few fights that are in the story felt like they didn't belong there. They didn't add anything. They didn't advance anything. And they directly conflicted with the main character who had these different personality types. In one case, one part, he's a gym rat where he exercises and works out every single day to be physically fit. And he has no problem, taking on 5 dudes who step on his dog's tail. But then the next minute, he doesn't want to fight. He doesn't want to advance his power in the RPG system and gaining levels and fighting quests and fighting monsters. Why? Because he doesn't want to take a risk with his dog, even though he absolutely knows on multiple occasions that there are antagonistic forces and levels mean something. And as a gamer, which he's supposed to be a gaming programmer, there should be like a definite awareness that, okay, RPG levels matter. And so with all those background influences conflicting with his actual actions, it felt like the reticence to level was just this thing that was like, oh, he can't level yet because it's not the right point to do his character progression or his arc where he's going to change his mind in power level. And that's what it ended up being. But it definitely felt like that was the case, which was annoying to me because like it didn't match with what was expected from his background. There we go. There's a few of my complaints, I guess. I would have personally, I think, enjoyed the story more if it focused on the most interesting aspects. Like all the Berserker stuff wasn't anything I hadn't seen before. Plenty of that. The trading aspect of it was relatively refreshing, and it was entertaining in its own way, even if it's not action focused. And I would have liked to see that developed more, but instead it twists into like this forced situation where he's for some reason taking on other influence without spoiling things, antagonistic forces, and going actual combat, which he's not particularly good at, and other characters, other people kind of going in to like save him and make him a success in some way. So he's not really like necessarily winning within his own strength to a degree, which was like kind of a sad, well, not sad, but it's just like a twist that didn't really match what I enjoyed about the story. There are other things that I enjoyed about the story. Character development was nicely done. Characters themselves are well written. I think that's probably the repeated refrain in a lot of the reviews. I like this character, the dwarf smith, or I like the corgi Louie, especially once he starts to talk, which is my favorite character. Or other characters in the story which are like really well done, have good dialogue, or funny and interesting. And so that's a good aspect of the story. Again, there are issues with the main character's personality, background, and his conflicting motivations that just felt like he was, again, restricted for the purpose of a story element. it didn't feel like some of these responses were completely natural, which I had just issues with. But overall, the characters are probably a highlight of the story. The game mechanics and story aren't bad, nothing particularly innovative. Lots of item character descriptions, mostly standard RPG stuff. The notifications and item descriptions were probably longer than they needed to be, especially with some of the icons that they had in the version that I got. And remember, I got a slightly earlier version where they took up whole pages, and at some certain points in the novel, the notifications, item descriptions, character descriptions were like multiple pages. So it was like, oh, 5, 6, 7 pages in a row were just nothing but this item or character description text, and it got a little unnecessary. I think a lot of that could have been summarized or just talked about it within the story text itself, of like someone, the main character, saying, oh wow, you're super powerful, this item is really cool and it does this ability, instead of like having an actual sheet just to limit some of those info dumpy billing item descriptions. So there you go. Overall, though, the story felt disjointed between those two different elements. The narrative structure, I should say. The action felt forced in every single instance in the story. And the Berserker title felt more like a false flag because there's barely any berserking in either narrative, whether it's future main character or current main character. There's the berserking element really only comes through at the very tail end of the story. So it should be, Day Trader instead of Berserker to me as a title. The story is essentially saved from a worse review score for me than a 6 out of 10 because of the good characters, the good dialogue. The corgi, Louie, is especially interesting and fun for me. And the neat trading system. The neat trading system isn't a bad element. I enjoyed it. It's just, again, conflicted with what I was expecting from the title Berserker. And the Berserker, King Conan kind of aspect of prologue and interludes. So for me, the story didn't work. You might like it better, I guess. And some people have enjoyed it. But for me, because those elements I mentioned, not getting a good review score, it just doesn't work for me. That's going to be Berserker, a LitRPG urban fantasy adventure, Apocosmos book number 1, with a score of 6 out of 10.